something like this. So theoretically, if anybody would in Kiev would come to the idea to send a few reinforcements to Kupiansk area, these bridgeheads could be destroyed, or at least the Russian advance and apostrophes in these areas could be stopped. But this is not happening. And then you have Kharkiv and Kursk. In Kharkiv, the Ukrainians are holding the front line, even liberating some ground. And in Kursk, the Russians are assaulting now anew, also deploying lots of airstrikes over there and really hitting the Ukrainians very hard. So it's not simple, and Ukrainians are slowly losing the ground in Kursk. So, well, we are going to see what happens over there.
Yeah, Tom, we will unpack all the things you mentioned slowly, but I know that you're quite critical about General Syrsky, and I know you advocate for military reform during wartime, as far as I understood. Yes. How long could this take, and what potential outcomes might it yield?
Well, the point about military reform is to improve the efficiency, combat effectiveness of the Ukrainian armed forces. If your troops are better trained, they're fighting better. If they're better commanded, they're fighting better too. Right now you have about a dozen of brigades in the ZSU, in the Ukrainian army, which are well trained and well commanded and which are fighting well, but the rest is not. The rest lacks training, the rest lacks command skills, the rest lacks equipment and everything else. And this is the responsibility of the commander on top, Glavkom, and the general staff of Ukrainian armed forces. They are not doing their job. They are, from my point of view, incompetent, proven as incompetent repeatedly, and therefore the situation is not improving. And that is the primary problem. Because of this, you have also troubles with recruitment and mobilization. Because of this, you have a problem with utilization of equipment you're receiving, with utilization of ammunition you're receiving, and so on and so on. And this is why your armed forces have such huge problems with trying to stop this Russian offensive, which is now lasting for over a year, actually for 1.5 years almost, since October 23.
So, as far as I understood, our soldiers doing well, but the problem is top generals.
Yes. Exactly. This is why I'm smiling always, because it is silly, really. When you monitor the behavior of Glavkom in particular, and several weeks ago I posted something on my blog, and I listed all the characteristics of his style of command, and this was actually a conclusion based on what I've got to hear over months and meanwhile years. And almost immediately after I posted this, I've started receiving thank you very much, messages. Thank you very much. Yes, it's exactly like you have written. It is that and that way. And this is precise description of Syrsky, how is he commanding. He's first ignoring the problem. Then once the problem does appear, then he is surprised by the problem. Then he sends a battalion to solve the problem. Then he is sending this battalion to run pointless counterattacks. Then he gets frustrated by the situation and forgets and abandons it and refocuses his attention somewhere else. And he is never learning a single lesson from any of his mistakes. And I said, this is what is resulting in very poor effectiveness, combat effectiveness of the mass of the ZSU. And this has to change. This is where the reform has to start. A new Glavkom, and then a complete reform of the training procedures, retraining of the entire force. This wouldn't take longer than 6 to 9 months at most. You have enough officers who know how this should be organized, how this should be run. The Glavkom and the general staff have received serious offers from several officers who have told them, let me reorganize the entire force, let me retrain the entire force. But they said no, or there is no time for this, or this is not the right moment for that, and so on and so on. And nothing is happening. They're still fighting like they think the Soviets would have fought in, let's say, 1980.
So the way Syrsky behaving, it cannot be the strategy.
It is not strategy. This is, I mean, if he has a strategy, this is to survive, somehow to muddle himself out of this trouble in which he's swimming all the time. But this is, he's not having no vision for the future of the ZSU. He is not solving any kind of problems. He's just, patching the front line with ever additional battalions taken from brigades from another sector, and creating ever bigger chaos. Not taking care for units, neighboring units, to communicate and coordinate their operations. Not taking care to command them. Not taking care to build up reserves. Not instilling the care for soldiers between his subordinate commanders, between especially the general staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ministry of Defense, and not to talk about so many of brigade commanders who are inexperienced, who lack the command skills and so on. He's doing nothing to improve the situation. He's solely focused on finding out where are the problems. He's always doing that too late. Then he's always reacting in the same fashion. He's becoming extremely predictable for the Russians, which is making their job easier. I mean, you have to imagine this, and this is the top commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and so on and so on. See, he's just causing troubles to Ukraine, nothing else. Troubles, ever continuous losses, heavy losses, unnecessary losses, especially in soldiers, in equipment, and so on and so on. And at the same time, no problem has been solved by him, not a one, over these 2 years he's in command now.
Let's shift a bit of our external, I would say, military operation. You mentioned Kursk. Tom,
yes.
After months of Ukraine did it, how reasonable, how effective it was?
Kursk as an operation, as a distraction or diversion, was a very good idea. Absolutely no discussion about this. And especially had the Glavkom and his staff understood the problems with supplies right from the start, and taking care to open additional routes via Sudzha to Korenevo, and in order to secure this sole battalion that was sent to capture Korenevo, to have enough ammunition when it was the issue of having enough ammunition, it would have had a very nice outlook for much bigger success, because the CSU could have taken Korenevo, could have driven further north, could have blocked this entire highway west of Kursk, and with this it would have made Russian counterattacks much more problematic than they are since September. So this was a brilliant opportunity that was wasted. And sadly, meanwhile, also about 600 troops were killed in this offensive, or while defending from Russian counterattacks. Many more have been injured, many of them very badly. And this is once again the same situation like in Bakhmut in early 23, where the best Ukrainian troops are wasted for a case that is actually lost. Because we have seen it already. Zelensky has, via diplomatic channels, offered Putin to exchange Kursk for certain other part of Ukraine, and Putin promptly said no. Why? Because he's convinced he can return Kursk, or completely liberate Kursk on his own, with help of his armed forces, and if not, then with help of North Koreans.
But it's not happening right now.
No, of course it is not happening. I mean, what is not happening is an exchange of terrain. What is happening are continuous Russian attacks. Now the North Koreans are back, and they are slowly, but nevertheless, pushing Ukrainians out of Kursk.
Well, Korea, it's a huge topic, but me ask you the question about the opportunities we are trying not to waste. The security service of Ukraine continues to strike Russian targets, though without a coordinated strategic approach, it seems. Would you say these attacks have become more effective eventually?
Well, it does appear the last month that they have finally decided to find a focus, and to focus on the Russian oil industry. And therefore, they have meanwhile really durably knocked out about 10% of the Russian oil industry, which means primarily oil refineries and oil depots. This is a nice success, great. The problem is this is going to take much more in order to have necessarily massive effects upon Russia. This is going to take some 6 to 9 months at least longer. It is also going to take development of much longer ranged weapons, because you have to hit refineries which are further away. And the more you have knocked out most of those which are close to Ukraine, but you still have to reach those further away from Ukraine. And that means you need not only weapons,